tragedy, and the endless images of John F. Kennedy standing strong at a podium, or Jacqueline Kennedy walking gracefully through the White House gardens. But behind their public story lies another one, a story built not only on dreams and determination, but also on bricks, marble, and timeless architecture. These grand estates, known as the Kennedy Mansions, are more than homes. They are living pieces of American history, each one filled with stories of ambition, love, loss, and legacy. From their seaside retreat in Massachusetts to their winter palace in Florida, and from their elegant New York apartment to their Virginia gathering place, the Kennedys' homes are like chapters in a great American novel, each revealing a new layer of who they were and what they stood for. So, today let's step into that world. Let's explore the old money mansions of the Kennedys and discover how their architecture tells the story of one of America's most unforgettable families. The Kennedy Compound, Hyannisport, Massachusetts. In the peaceful seaside town of Hyannisport, where the Atlantic breeze carries the sound of seagulls and sailboats, sits one of the most iconic homes in American history, the Kennedy Compound. This isn't just a house, it's the heart of the Kennedy family, the place where dreams were born and history was made. The story begins in 1928, when Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., the powerful patriarch of the Kennedy family, first laid eyes on a charming white house overlooking the deep blue waters of Nantucket Sound. The house had been built in 1904, and it wasn't particularly grand, just a cozy seaside cottage. But to Joseph Kennedy, it was a blank canvas. He bought it immediately. With his keen eye for opportunity, the same instinct that made him a millionaire, Joseph transformed the humble cottage into a sprawling summer retreat for his wife, Rose Kennedy, and their 9 energetic children. During those golden summers, the Kennedy kids, John, Robert, Ted, and their siblings, would spend their days sailing across the calm waters, playing football on the lawn, and enjoying family dinners that lasted late into the night. The air was filled with laughter, salt, and the sense of promise that defined the Kennedy spirit. Over time, the compound grew. John F. Kennedy bought the house next door in 1956, and Robert F. Kennedy bought another nearby in 1959. Soon, what started as one beach house became a 3-home estate, connected by grassy lawns, winding driveways, and a view of the Atlantic that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. By the time the 1960s arrived, the Kennedy compound was no longer just a family getaway. It had become a stage where history unfolded. When John F. Kennedy ran for president in 1960, Hyannisport became his campaign headquarters. Reporters camped outside the gates. Advisors came and went. And inside the white shingled house, strategy meetings were held late into the night. When John F. Kennedy won the presidency, the compound became known as the Summer White House. World leaders, senators, and celebrities all made their way to Hyannisport to visit the young, charismatic president. And yet, behind the glamour and politics, it remained a home, filled with family gatherings, games of touch football, and the laughter of Kennedy children running along the beach. Architecturally, the main house was built in the classic Cape Cod style. White clapboard walls, a wide front porch, and big bay windows that let the light pour in. Inside, there were 12 bedrooms, 4 reception rooms, and a grand kitchen that often smelled of Rose Kennedy's homemade meals. The compound's beauty wasn't about flashy luxury. It was understated elegance, the kind of wealth that didn't need to show off. Everything about it reflected the Kennedys' unique blend of old money grace and modern ambition. But like much of the Kennedy story, the compound also witnessed heartbreak. When John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, Hyannisport became a place of mourning. Family members gathered here to grieve and to support one another, turning to the familiar sea that had always comforted them. Later, Robert F. Kennedy and Edward Ted Kennedy continued the family tradition, hosting children, friends, and political guests. It was a place of both sorrow and strength, where private pain and public duty existed side by side. In the years that followed, the compound became deeply symbolic. To many Americans, it represented the spirit of the Kennedy dynasty, their resilience, unity, and unshakable belief in service to the country. Even after Ted Kennedy's death in 2009, the compound's legacy continued, In 2012, the main house was donated to the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate, ensuring that it would remain a place of learning and inspiration. The Institute planned to use the house for educational programs, a fitting tribute to a family that valued both knowledge and public service. This gesture, supported by Victoria Kennedy, Ted's widow, and a generous $3.2 million donation from his re-election campaign fund, ensured that the compound's story would live on. Today, the Kennedy compound still stands tall on the windy shores of Cape Cod. The white paint may have faded a little, the waves may crash a bit harder, but the spirit inside those walls, the laughter, the ambition, the tragedy, and the hope, remains as alive as ever. It is, in every sense, the soul of the Kennedy legacy. The White House and the Winter White House, the Kennedy White House, Washington, D.C. When John F. Kennedy became president in 1961, the world saw a new kind of White House, one filled with youth, charm, and a bold vision for the future. The Kennedys brought a sense of energy and sophistication that the American public had never seen before. But behind the official meetings and press conferences, the White House became something more than just a political headquarters. Under John and Jacqueline Kennedy, it was transformed into a symbol of culture, history, and hope. Before the Kennedys moved in, the White House had grown dull, its walls covered in mismatched furniture and modern decorations that erased much of its history. But Jacqueline Kennedy, the new First Lady, saw something others didn't. To her, the White House wasn't just a home for presidents. It was a living museum of American history, a place that should honor the past while inspiring the future. So, she began one of the most ambitious restoration projects in White House history. Working alongside interior designer Dorothy May Sister Parrish, Jacqueline carefully studied each room's history. She wanted to restore them, not just with elegance, but with authenticity. She sought out antique furniture, portraits of former presidents, and period-appropriate details. Everything that could bring America's story back to life. Her goal wasn't to make the White House look rich. It was to make it feel meaningful. Every chair, every chandelier, every piece of art had to tell a story. At first, some critics doubted her. They called it decoration, a luxury project in a time when America faced serious challenges like the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement. But Jacqueline ignored the noise. To her, preserving history was just as important as shaping the future. In 1962, she invited television cameras into the White House for the very first time. It was called A Tour of the White House with Mrs. John F. Kennedy, and it changed everything. Millions of Americans tuned in to see the First Lady guide them through the historic halls. Her calm, elegant voice explained how each room represented a chapter of America's past. Viewers were mesmerized. For the first time, people could see the White House not just as a political building, but as the heart of the nation's story. That broadcast won Jacqueline Kennedy an Emmy Award, the first ever given to a First Lady, and forever changed how the world viewed the presidency. But the Kennedys' influence went even deeper. They turned the White House into a cultural center, inviting artists, writers, and musicians from around the world to perform and discuss ideas. Under John and Jackie, the White House became a beacon of creativity, a symbol of intelligence and class. When you imagine the Kennedys in the White House, you might picture elegant dinners, the sound of classical music drifting through the rooms, or world leaders arriving at the front gates. But beneath the glamour, the White House was also the backdrop for some of the most intense and emotional moments in modern history. Here, JFK faced crises like the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Berlin standoff, and the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the world stood on the brink of nuclear war. He made decisions that shaped the future of humanity, all from the Oval Office, often returning home to Jacqueline and their young children, Caroline and John Jr., for brief moments of peace. When President Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, the White House became the nation's mourning ground. Millions of people looked at it not just as a symbol of government, but as a symbol of loss and resilience. Even today, many of the details Jacqueline Kennedy restored remain part of the White House's charm. She also founded the White House Historical Association, which continues to preserve and educate the public about its heritage. The Kennedys didn't just live in the White House. They redefined it. They made it a place of beauty, intellect, and inspiration, forever changing what Americans expected from their leaders. The Winter White House, Palm Beach, Florida. If Hyannisport was the Kennedy summer sanctuary, then Palm Beach was their winter paradise. The Kennedy Winter White House, as it came to be known, stood among the palm trees and ocean waves of Palm Beach, Florida. The estate was grand, sunlit, and serene, a perfect escape from Washington's cold winters and constant chaos. The story of this estate began in 1933, when Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. bought it for $110,000, a fortune at the time. The house had been built 10 years earlier by the legendary architect Addison Misner, who was famous for his Mediterranean-style mansions. The Kennedy home had all the features of old Florida luxury: arched doorways, red-tiled roofs, sun-drenched courtyards, and long hallways that caught the ocean breeze. The backyard stretched all the way to the beach, with a sparkling swimming pool and tennis courts surrounded by palm trees. To the Kennedys, it wasn't just a vacation spot. It was a statement. It said, "The Kennedys have arrived." During the 1950s and early 60s, the Palm Beach mansion became one of the most famous homes in America. When John F. Kennedy became president, he spent many holidays here, and the house earned its nickname, the Winter White House. But even before his presidency, JFK loved this house deeply. It was here that he wrote much of his Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Profiles in Courage. Later, as president, he would sit on the balcony overlooking the Atlantic Ocean and work on his speeches, including parts of his 1961 inaugural address, the one that would inspire a generation. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Behind the glamour, however, the Winter White House was also a place of deep reflection. During tense political moments, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK often retreated here to think, surrounded by the calm sound of the waves. The estate also had direct communication lines to the real White House, allowing the president to work remotely, decades before that idea became common. From this tropical mansion, decisions were made that affected the entire world. Architecturally, the home was stunning. With its Spanish-inspired arches, terracotta roof, and white stucco walls, it captured the spirit of 1920s Palm Beach. The famous architect Maurice Fatio later oversaw renovations, carefully updating the home without losing its original charm. Inside, the rooms were bright and airy, with grand fireplaces, antique furniture, and colorful art that reflected the family's love of culture and style. Outside, long balconies looked over the glittering Atlantic, where the horizon seemed endless. When Joseph Kennedy grew older, the mansion became more than just a winter retreat. It became a family gathering spot. Generations of Kennedys visited, filling the house with laughter, political debates, and games of catch under the Florida sun. After John F. Kennedy's assassination, the home took on a more somber tone. It became a place of remembrance, a reminder of the golden years of the early 1960s, when the Kennedys seemed unstoppable. Even decades later, the Palm Beach home continues to be a historic landmark. Its legacy was preserved through renovations approved by the Palm Beach Landmarks Preservation Commission in 2021, ensuring that its beauty and history would be protected for generations to come. In every way, the Winter White House reflects what the Kennedys stood for: elegance, intellect, and the perfect balance between power and peace. New York elegance and Hickory Hill. Legacy: the Kennedy residence, Fifth Avenue, New York City. After the heartbreaking loss of President John F. Kennedy in 1963, the world mourned. For Jacqueline Kennedy, the grief was unimaginable. She had lost her husband, the father of her children, and the partner who had shared her vision of a more beautiful, thoughtful America. But even in her sorrow, Jacqueline carried herself with the same grace that had defined her as First Lady. And in 1964, she made a quiet but powerful move to New York City. Her new home was a grand 15th-floor penthouse at 1040 Fifth Avenue, overlooking the green expanse of Central Park. The building stood in one of Manhattan's most prestigious neighborhoods, surrounded by old-world architecture, art galleries, and high society. To the outside world, it was simply a beautiful apartment. But to Jacqueline Kennedy, it became something more: a sanctuary. After years in the spotlight, the Fifth Avenue residence gave her privacy and peace. From her windows, she could look out over the park, the same park where her children, Caroline and John Jr., would later play. Inside, the penthouse was a reflection of her taste, timeless, sophisticated, and deeply personal. The rooms featured herringbone wood floors, tall ceilings, and elegant fireplaces that gave warmth to the modern city air. She filled the space with books, art, and mementos from her life, reminders of the White House, her travels abroad, and her lifelong love for culture and history. Every piece of furniture, every photograph had a story to tell. To guests, her apartment was a perfect mix of European elegance and New York charm. It had 5 bedrooms, each with its own private bathroom, a cozy library lined with wooden shelves, and a grand living room where she often entertained close friends, writers, and artists. But most of all, it was a home filled with heart. Here, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, as she was known after her remarriage to shipping magnate Aristotle Onassis, rebuilt her life. She focused on her children, her writing, and her passion for historical preservation. And in New York, her influence went far beyond her apartment walls. In the 1970s, when the historic Grand Central Terminal was threatened with demolition, Jacqueline became one of its most outspoken defenders. She believed that preserving the city's architectural treasures was vital to its soul. Her leadership helped save the terminal, keeping it as one of New York's most beloved landmarks. Her advocacy didn't stop there. She worked to protect St. Bartholomew's Church and other historic sites throughout the city, proving that her dedication to beauty and culture extended far beyond Washington. For 3 decades, she lived at 1040 Fifth Avenue, from 1964 until her death in 1994. To those who knew her, the apartment symbolized her strength, resilience, and refined spirit. After her passing, the apartment became a highly sought-after residence among New York's elite. Billionaires and business magnates would later own it, but none could ever match the presence and grace that Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis brought to that space. Even today, people who walk past the building on Fifth Avenue look up and think of her. They imagine the former First Lady standing by the window, the soft light of sunset reflecting off the park as she looks out over the city she helped preserve. The apartment remains a symbol, not just of wealth and refinement, but of the unshakable grace of a woman who carried history on her shoulders. Hickory Hill, the House of Ideas, McLean, Virginia. Not far from Washington, D.C., hidden among the rolling green hills of McLean, Virginia, stands another Kennedy landmark, Hickory Hill. This elegant red brick mansion wasn't as famous as the White House or Hyannisport, but for decades, it was one of the most important gathering places in American political life. The story of Hickory Hill begins in 1955, when Robert F. Kennedy and his wife Ethel Kennedy purchased the property. The Georgian-style mansion sat on 6 acres of land, surrounded by tall trees and open lawns, the perfect place to raise a family and host friends. And with 11 children, the Kennedys filled the home with life. Laughter echoed through the halls, tennis games played out on the courts, and the sound of piano music drifted from the parlor. But Hickory Hill wasn't just a family home. It became a center of political and intellectual energy, unlike any other. Throughout the 1960s, Robert F. Kennedy, then U.S. Attorney General and later Senator, turned Hickory Hill into a hub for discussion and debate. He hosted what became known as the Hickory Hill Seminars, informal but powerful gatherings that brought together some of the sharpest minds in the country. Writers, historians, journalists, and politicians would crowd into the living room, exchanging ideas about everything from civil rights to foreign policy. It wasn't unusual to see figures like Arthur Schlesinger Jr., John Glenn, or Lyndon Johnson's aides debating passionately late into the night. These weren't formal meetings. They were lively intellectual salons filled with energy and curiosity. The Kennedys believed that progress came from discussion, from challenging ideas and exploring new perspectives. And at the center of it all was Robert Kennedy, pacing the room, listening intently, pushing others to think deeper about the issues shaping America. While the White House symbolized power, Hickory Hill represented vision, a place where the future was imagined and argued over. The house itself reflected that spirit. Built in the early 1800s, it featured grand columns, high ceilings, and sweeping staircases. The large backyard was perfect for the children, who often invited friends over for swimming, horseback riding, or simple outdoor games. Yet, for all its grandeur, Hickory Hill was full of warmth. Ethel Kennedy made sure it never felt like a museum. Guests could come in barefoot, kids ran through the halls, and dogs often slept by the fireplace. After Robert F. Kennedy's tragic assassination in 1968, the home once again became a place of mourning and memory. Ethel continued to live there for decades, keeping the spirit of her husband and family alive. The laughter of children gave the house strength, even as it carried the weight of loss. Hickory Hill became a living reminder of what the Kennedys stood for: faith, family, and service. In later years, the estate was sold, but the new owners treated it with great respect. In 2009, it was purchased by tech entrepreneur Alan Dabier, who carefully restored the mansion while preserving its history. Today, Hickory Hill remains one of the most iconic estates in Virginia, a national historic landmark that continues to represent the ideals of courage, compassion, and community that the Kennedys embodied. When people visit Hickory Hill, they don't just see a house. They feel the echoes of laughter, debate, and hope that once filled its rooms. They feel the power of a family that believed deeply in the promise of America, legacy of stone, sea, and history. When you step back and look at all these mansions, the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport, the White House in Washington, the Winter White House in Palm Beach, Jacqueline Kennedy's Fifth Avenue apartment, and Hickory Hill in Virginia, you begin to see a pattern. Each home wasn't just a place to live. It was a mirror of the family's identity, a reflection of their dreams, values, and struggles. The Kennedys weren't simply politicians or public figures. They were builders of legacy, both through their words and through the walls that surrounded them. The architecture of ambition. The story of the Kennedy homes is, in many ways, the story of American ambition. When Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. first began buying properties in the early 20th century, he wasn't just collecting real estate. He was building a foundation for the family's future. Each property was chosen carefully: a beach house in Massachusetts, a winter estate in Florida, a city penthouse in Manhattan. He wanted places that matched his vision, locations that combined old money sophistication with new world opportunity. By the time his sons, John, Robert, and Ted, entered public life, those same homes became backdrops to the making of history. The Hyannisport compound, once a summer getaway, became a symbol of unity and family strength. The White House, under John and Jacqueline Kennedy, was reborn as a house of culture and light. The Palm Beach mansion became a bridge between the private and the presidential, while the New York apartment represented Jacqueline's resilience after tragedy. And finally, Hickory Hill stood as a beacon of ideas, progress, and political courage. Together, they tell one continuous story, a story of a family that rose from humble beginnings to become the embodiment of America's greatest hopes and hardest losses. Homes of hope and tragedy. To the outside world, the Kennedy homes looked perfect, grand estates filled with laughter, sophistication, and elegance. But behind those walls were moments of grief, struggle, and endurance. At Hyannisport, the family gathered to celebrate victories, but also to mourn devastating losses. At the White House, Jacqueline Kennedy walked its halls in silence after her husband's assassination, surrounded by the history she had worked so hard to restore. At Hickory Hill, Ethel Kennedy continued to raise her children after Robert's death, keeping his dream alive through compassion and public service. Even Jacqueline's Fifth Avenue apartment, though peaceful and beautiful, carried the quiet weight of remembrance, a place where she could finally rest after years in the public eye. The Kennedys' homes tell both sides of the American story, the triumphs that inspire us and the heartbreaks that humble us. Preserving the dream. One of the most remarkable things about the Kennedy legacy is how it continues to live on through preservation. When Victoria Kennedy donated the Hyannisport main house to the Edward M. Kennedy Institute in 2012, she ensured that future generations could learn from the past. That single act symbolized everything the family stood for: service, education, and memory. At the same time, Jacqueline Kennedy's influence can still be felt across the country, From the carefully preserved rooms of the White House to the protected landmarks of New York City, her passion for architecture and history sparked a national movement for preservation that continues today. Even Hickory Hill, though now privately owned, is treated as a living piece of history, proof that ideas once spoken within its walls can still echo across time. And the Winter White House in Palm Beach remains a treasured landmark, its Mediterranean beauty shining as brightly as the day Joseph Kennedy first purchased it. The Kennedy aesthetic. What made the Kennedys' homes so captivating wasn't just their grandeur, it was their style. They embodied what many people call the old money look, a blend of simplicity, refinement, and authenticity. White wood, soft coastal tones, and natural textures. Furniture that looked worn but loved. Portraits that told stories rather than just decorated walls. It wasn't about showing off wealth. It was about showing taste. The Kennedys understood something timeless. That true beauty isn't in extravagance, but in the meaning behind it. Every home they owned carried a message. That elegance could live side by side with purpose. That's why, even decades later, their houses still fascinate us. They don't just look rich, they feel alive. A living legacy. When you look at the Kennedy family's impact, their politics, their culture, their tragedies, it's easy to forget how much of their story was written not in speeches or headlines, but in places. Each mansion stands as a chapter in a larger saga. Hyannis Port, the heart, the White House, the vision, Palm Beach, the peace, Fifth Avenue, the resilience, Hickory Hill, the mind. Together, they form a map of the Kennedy legacy, stretching from the cold Atlantic shores of Massachusetts to the warm sands of Florida, and from the marble halls of Washington to the glittering skyline of New York. Wherever they went, the Kennedys left behind more than memories. They left behind monuments to the American spirit, the final word. The Kennedy story will always feel larger than life, filled with both light and shadow, victory and sorrow. But through it all, their homes remind us of something deeply human, that every family, no matter how powerful, seeks comfort, belonging, and legacy. Behind every speech and every photograph were moments of real life, children laughing by the sea, late-night talks by the fire, music drifting from open windows, and dreams whispered beneath the stars. Those walls witnessed it all. The waves still crash against the Hyannis Port shore. The chandeliers of the White House still gleam. The Palm Beach estate still glows under the sun. And somewhere, the echoes of their laughter and their lessons live on. Because in the end, the Kennedy mansions aren't just reminders of wealth and privilege. They are reminders of what endures, family, history, and the timeless hope of a nation that still believes in the power of grace and greatness.